Good evening, everybody. How is everyone doing? I hope I'm audible to everybody. भाई सबको सुनाई दे रही है मेरी आवाज. Can everybody just quickly put it in the chat box that yes, I'm audible. Yes, Charlotte. Good, very nice. That's good to know. Okay, clear. Nice. And you can see the slides as well. Can you see my PPT? Is that visible also? Yes, is it? Okay. Ah, Karthik is here. Good evening, teacher. Okay, great. Chalo, good. Then let's begin. Okay, today's class, we are going to talk about something very specific. Because ye ek aisa topic hai, which is covered under what is known as miscellaneous. You know, when you're preparing for the legal reasoning part in your CLAT exam, there's certain topics which we do in detail. You know, you'll have so many lessons on them. There'll be so many, you know, if you are enrolled with us, then you'll realize kitni sari classes ho rahi hain, class sheets ho rahi hain, and everything. And otherwise also, you would realize that, you know, there's a lot which can be found material which is available. There are a lot of things, there are a lot of resources from where you can cover those topics. But these miscellaneous topics, you know, these are the kind of topics जिनको पकड़ में लाना थोड़ा सा मुश्किल हो जाता है, because since they are miscellaneous, you know, you tend to get one odd question every other year from them. So, you know, one tends to at times overlook them, which is a big mistake that you could be making, right? Or sometimes you feel that, you know, whatever might be the sources, there is nothing which is clearly telling me कि भैया मुझे इसमें करना क्या है. Because, you know, as much as you might be in love with Google data, a lot of times it happens is it gives you so much of junk information that you really fail to understand कि मुझे exactly जो relevant है वो कहाँ मिलेगा. Right? So what we are going to do in today's class is we are going to discuss some of the concepts which are very, very specifically relating to environment law. Right? यहाँ वहाँ की हम बातें नहीं करेंगे. हम सिर्फ environment law से related जो concepts हैं, which over the years we have seen have been forming a part of the CLAT exam. या उससे पहले एंडलेस के पेपर्स में भी वो कॉन्सेप्ट्स आ चुके हैं, अभी क्लैट के पेपर्स में भी वो कॉन्सेप्ट्स आ रहे हैं. एंड ऑन सिमिलर लाइंस what are other such concepts which are important जिनका आपको थोड़ा सा knowledge होना जरूरी है, right? So on that note, let's see what is exactly that we are going to do in today's class. आज हम करेंगे कुछ constitutional law provisions which are specifically related to environmental law. Next, we are going to do certain major legislations. अब environmental law से related बहुत सारे laws होंगे. हम सब laws के बारे में आपको जानना जरूरी नहीं है, but you should have a basic idea about what is being, you know, what are the major laws, because you can get questions on those major laws. उनके बारे में थोड़ा सा आपको idea होना चाहिए, right? So which are those laws? What are the basics that you need to know about them? That is something which we can do. Next would be important principles relating to environmental law. So now this is something which is very, 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 very important. This is something which we have seen to, you know, be to being a part of CLAT 2 times already. अभी 2020 में जब से नया पेपर पैटर्न हुआ है, in 2020 itself there was a full blown passage on principles relating to environment law. 2020 में हुआ, 21 में nothing we saw from environment law. 22 again, there was a full blown passage on environmental law again, right? So this is not a fluke. This is something which shows that, okay, you know, this is a topic which is really important from your CLAT perspective, right? That's the reason I wanted to have this session today, okay? Just for that, so that you are clear as to what you need to prepare in your, for your CLAT in this particular subject. Okay? Now, these are the 3 things we would be doing in detail. Now, there is one thing which I have written here on the slide, very, very specifically. It says the Stockholm Declaration. Now, why have I mentioned the Stockholm Declaration right on the first slide? Because this, so far as our country is concerned, even internationally, this is something which is, very, very important. One of the most landmark declarations or international treaties regarding environmental law. But for our country, it is even more so important because prior to 1972 mein, our then Prime Minister Indira Gandhi, she went and she was a part of this conference. When she came back, उसके बाद से हमारी country में environment law के legislations बनने शुरू हुए. Prior to this, we did not have any proper legislation or anything on environmental law. We were so concerned about all the other things which were going on कि भाई अभी independence मिली है, अभी हमें industrialization करना है, हमें अभी अपनी food security को देखना है. There were so many things which were going on that environment was the last thing on our minds, right? So this is where we said the first step that India took towards environmental law, right? Regulation of things relating to the environment, right? That is why this is something which is very, very important. Now, one little thing I would like to tell all of you, जो भी हम आज के YouTube session में पढ़ेंगे, there would be various concepts that I would be dealing with. There'll be various international treaties or national laws and things like that, which I would be mentioning. अब here and forward इस YouTube वीडियो के बाद आपको करना क्या है? आपको सारे के सारे जो हम concepts cover करेंगे, उन concepts के बारे में you should go ahead and read on your own. Okay, that's something which is very, very, very important. जो हम बोलते हैं ना that कुछ ना कुछ legal एक article, कुछ ना कुछ रोज पढ़ना ही पढ़ना है, so that your reading improves, your grammar improves, your English improves, your speed improves. वो सब improve होगा. Your comfort level with legal writing would improve. तो जब ये comfort level legal writing के लिए हमें improve करना है, आज के YouTube session से take away ये होना चाहिए that whatever topics, major headings that you see that we are covering today, I want each one of you to do that as your leisure reading. Okay, I consider that as leisure reading. Okay, that is not something आप CLAT के लिए prepare कर रहे हो. Take it as a leisure reading. मेट्रो में ट्रैवल कर रहे हो, यहाँ से वहां जा रहे हो, घर में थोड़ी देर के लिए टाइम मिला है, बोर हो रहे हो, you're waiting for somebody, waiting for a friend to join you for a cup of coffee in CCD or wherever. Whenever you have time, phone आपके पास है, एक list बना के रखो इन topics की, and randomly from whatever source you feel like, Google पे जाके, web में जाके, start reading on these topics. So the first thing that you start reading on would be the Stockholm Declaration. Okay, this is something which will expand your knowledge, expand your horizon, and it will make you comfortable with your passages, because that is something I know most of you feel scared about. Like Nitya here has, ma'am, where can I practice miscellaneous legal topic questions? But जब practice miscellaneous legal topic questions तो आपको कहीं ना कहीं मिलेंगे. We will also give you, we will provide you with sheets and everything. But in addition to that, practicing questions is important है right now that you start getting into the practice of reading things from different sources. That will really help you in improving your score. Okay, so now let's move on from the general gyan. So let's start off with the first heading. We'll start off with the constitutional law provisions. Now these are things which are fairly simple, right? So the first and the foremost article which is there here is Article 21. So जो आपका Article 21 है, everybody knows Article 21 is I think it's the shortest and the widest article so far as Part 3, Chapter Fundamental Rights is concerned, right? So there are a lot of things which are included in right to life and personal liberty, which is what Article 21 is about. Can anybody tell me what are the various rights or what are the various things which have been included under right to life? Because I think everybody knows Supreme Court ने Article 21 इतना widely interpret करा है कि भाई Article 21 जो है, it is not living like a mere animal existence nahi hai. It is much more than that, right? So can you guys tell me as to kya include kiya hai Article 21 mein? This is something which I'm sure most of you would be aware of. So quick, tell me, right to life includes, of course, if it is on this slide, you know it includes right to environment, right? That is going to be there. Okay, Nitya is telling me right to live with dignity. Okay. Anything else that has been included in right to life? या सिर्फ एनिमल एग्जिस्टेंस है कि भाई तुम जी रहे हो उतना ही काफी है, दैट इज अ राइट टू लाइफ, नोबडी कैन टेक योर लाइफ अवे? वुड दैट बी राइट टू लाइफ? और okay, Udit is telling me right to privacy, right to livelihood, right to private proper environment, right to health. Good, right? So right to life has been interpreted in such a wide manner so far as our Supreme Court is concerned. And what you would realize is all these judgments, wherein this right to life has been given such a broad interpretation, they started off somewhere in 80s. Even when you talk about right to environment, it was in the 80s when Article 21 actually included right to environment. Again, I go back to the fact कि 1972 में वो Stockholm Declaration हुआ, उसके बाद ही ये सारे changes आए, right? In fact, the next two articles, Article 48A and Article 51AG. Now, here, these two were the only are the only articles which specifically mention environment. पूरे constitution में, in fact, जब constitution बना था, at that point in time, environment was not anywhere in the mind of the makers of the constitution. No, the fathers of the constitution were not worried about the environment because बहुत सारी चीजें थी worry करने के लिए. So it was after the Stockholm Declaration that this particular amendment was laid out, जहां पे आपको 48A क्या है आपका? Under which chapter it comes? Can anybody tell me? 48A कौन से chapter के अंदर आता है? 48A, is this a fundamental right? Does 48A come under fundamental right? Okay, good. It is part 4. It is what is known as your DPSP. It's Directive Principle of State Policy. Now, under 48A, what have they written? They have given or they have laid the responsibility on the state to protect and improve environment, right? So, ये DPSP में इन्होंने add करा, wherein environment को safeguard, को safety रखना, it is going to be the state's responsibility. And right, उसी का opposite या उसका a similar responsibility was also put on the citizen of India. Every citizen of India was given the responsibility to improve, protect and improve natural environment, right? तो यहाँ पे पहली बार ये एक correlative सी एक responsibility both state and on citizens was laid down. और ये कौन सा part है? This was DPSP. 51AG. Anybody can tell me? 51AG क्या है? These are directive principles of state policy. What are these? Yes. Little tidbits of constitution also come in today's class. Fundamental duties. Good. Good, Nitya. Good, Rakshita. These are your fundamental duties, right? The part, this is 51A, which is giving you fundamental duties. This is part 4A. Fourth are DPSP. और ये पूरा का पूरा part ही, it was brought into force by the amendment, wherein fundamental duties was made a part of the constitution, right? So this was the time when environment as a whole or as a concept was actually included within our constitution. ठीक, ये दो चीजें हैं इस फंडे की. अच्छा, मुझे बताओ DPSP और fundamental duties, are they enforceable? Can you go to the court and enforce them? Can you go to the court and say कि boss, state is not looking after the environment, I want to sue the state. State कुछ कर ही नहीं रहा है, मेरे घर के सामने इतनी ज्यादा माइनिंग हो रही है एंड पूरा का पूरा जो पहाड़ है वो गिर गया है एंड I want the state to pay for it and my right under 48A is getting violated. Can you do that? You cannot do that. Why? Because these are not enforceable. DPSP तो clearly चैप्टर जब स्टार्ट होता है तभी लिखा हुआ है कि भाई दीज आर नॉट इन्फोर्सिएबल, दीज आर नॉन जस्टिशिएबल राइट्स, राइट। तो ये the only thing it does is it can help the government make laws, and at times when you are interpreting the fundamental rights, उस टाइम पे ये DPSP का हम थोड़ा हेल्प लेते हैं। when we study fundamental rights, उस टाइम पे इसको हम और अच्छे से समझेंगे, ठीक। Okay, any which ways. Next is Article 253. Now, 253 specifically environment के बारे में नहीं बात करता है, but the reason why I mentioned it here is जो हमने सबसे पहली चीज बोली थी भाई स्टॉकहोम डिक्लेरेशन की वजह से we started this entire development of environmental law in our country. वो क्यों किया हमने? Via this Article 253 कि भाई कोई भी इंटरनेशनल कन्वेंशन, ट्रीटी, अग्रीमेंट अगर हमारी कंट्री का है साथ, then at that point in time we can create, or the parliament has the right to create a law for the country, and that right is under Article 253. So these are some of the articles which are essential, which are relate to environmental law. I hope everybody is clear. So far so good. Good. Chalo. Up next, let's move on to, अब देखते हैं अगली क्या चीज है। अब हमने देख लिया कि भाई कॉन्स्टिट्यूशन से रिलेटेड मेजर लॉज क्या हैं। Next thing to see is what are the major legislations relating to environment law. Now, as all of you are aware, कोई स्पेसिफिक लॉ एक्ट के बारे में नॉलेज बेस्ड क्वेश्चन नहीं आएगा आपको, बट अ ब्रीफ अंडरस्टैंडिंग ऑफ द फ्रेमवर्क कि भाई लीगल फ्रेमवर्क क्या है हमारी कंट्री में एनवायरमेंट लॉ का, दैट इज अ गुड आइडिया टू हैव दैट नॉलेज, इट्स अ गुड आइडिया टू हैव। ओके, नाउ रिमेंबर एनवायरमेंटल लॉ हैज रिसेंटली बीन कोडिफाइड। अभी तक अदरवाइज जो एनवायरमेंटल लॉ का कॉन्सेप्ट था ना, दे यूज्ड टू बी कवर्ड अंडर the law of torts. Remember torts? करा है क्लास में, करते रहते हैं हम लोग, राइट। सो ये जो आपका एनवायरमेंट लॉ था ये मेजरली टॉर्ट लॉ के अंडर आता था, बिकॉज इन टॉर्ट लॉ इफ यू रिमेंबर यू गाइज, वी ऑलवेज डू कि भाई आपका एक लीगल राइट होता है जिसको अगर वायलेट करोगे तो आपको कोई ना कोई उसका कॉम्पनसेशन मिलेगा, राइट। सो ऑब्वियसली राइट टू एनवायरमेंट इज अ वेरी नेचुरल सॉर्ट ऑफ अ राइट विच यू हैव एज अ ह्यूमन बीइंग. Now, that was the reason why my environment law initially there was no codification as such, and it was considered to be a part of torts. Slowly and steadily, as with other laws, it has been codified. और जब हम ये कोडिफिकेशन देखते हैं तो अगेन हम देखेंगे कि हमारी जितनी भी कोडिफिकेशन हुई है दैट इज पोस्ट दी स्टॉकहोम डिक्लेरेशन। वो स्टॉकहोम डिक्लेरेशन के बाद ही हमारी ये कोडिफिकेशन सारी स्टार्ट हुई है, राइट। नाउ द फर्स्ट लॉ टू डील विद environment, not specifically, but it is specifically related to environment, but rather than environment in general, it was more about wildlife protection. So 1972 में जो हमारा पहला environment related law आया था, that was the Wildlife Protection Act, right? Now this was there, and after this came one of the most famous and one of the most used acts so far as environment is concerned. This was the बोलते ना path breaking, या वो एक law जिससे कि environment protection के बारे में actually लोगों ने सोचना शुरू किया, courts में litigation होनी शुरू हुई. That was your Water Prevention and Control Act, right? So this was the act. Again, क्यों ये बना? Because of the Stockholm Declaration. वहां पे हमारी we had vowed that we will do something towards the environment protection. That is when we came up with this law. We came up with Water Prevention and Control of Pollution Act. This specifically, as the name suggests, deals only with water, right? So water में pollution का कि भाई कितना what kind of a discharge, कितना limit होता है, all those things come under the Water Prevention and Control of Pollution Act. ये 74 में बना था. Similar law was there made regarding air. तो water and air की specific legislations बनी थी. That was there. And thereafter, after these two laws happened the Bhopal gas tragedy. Everybody remembers that Bhopal gas tragedy. Do you remember what was the name of the company? जो भोपाल गैस tragedy वाला case हुआ था? Can anybody tell me? What was the name? Because that was the time when that happened that we realized that boss हमारे पास जो laws है ना वो थोड़ी सी कमी है laws के बारे में. So anybody can tell me what was the name of that case of that company? Very popular. Good. Union Carbide. Union Carbide was the name. Union Carbide का भोपाल में plant था, and there was this huge gas leak which happened. Thousands of people suffered because of that. That is the time when we felt, you know, as a nation, कि we need some legislation which covers not only water and air but something more. You know, तो something more की जब बात आई तो एक Environment Protection Act 1986 में हमने pass करा. Now this particular act is also known as the umbrella legislation. ये एक umbrella legislation है जो सारे के सारे environment related issues को cover करता है. Right? So it is not a specific area of environment that we are covering, but हर चीज, right? चाहे पानी हो, हवा हो, forest हो, wetlands हो, कुछ भी हो. It is an umbrella legislation which, you know, which is actually which covers each and everything. Okay, so that is your Environment Protection Act. अब ये जो आपकी Environment Protection Act है, air prevention, water prevention, इन सारी acts के अंदर there are a lot of rules and all also which have been time and again being made by the government. तो कई बार आप when you are researching on EPA, on Environment Protection Act, you will come across अच्छा कुछ hazardous waste disposal के लिए कोई government ने नया rule बनाया है, noise pollution के लिए government ने नया rule बनाया है. तो ये जो umbrella legislation है, इसके अंदर there are tons and tons of rules to take care of specific environment related problems which have been made time and again. Okay. Now, so far as you guys are concerned, you don't need to have in-depth detail about all the fundas relating to these acts. Okay, all you need is to have a brief idea कि भाई ऐसी law है and majorly what does it cover. Okay, but I would advise कि इनके बारे में जाके, you know, at home do read up on these. Okay, next is the next legislation important when you look at you know, environment law is concerned. You have this Public Liability Insurance Act. अब ये Public Liability Insurance Act जो था, ये basically again by product था भोपाल गैस tragedy का. ये हमने भोपाल गैस tragedy से बहुत ज़्यादा learn किया. We realized that was, you know, if something like this happens, the people who have suffered because of these hazardous substances, they should be given some immediate relief. Right? So this Public Liability Insurance Act was a byproduct of that. Okay, in fact आगे जाके हम एक concept पढ़ेंगे जो तुमने TOTS में भी पढ़ा होगा, absolute liability, again a byproduct of the Bhopal gas tragedy. Okay, okay, now that is the Public Liability Insurance Act. Then next was 2002 में this major act was passed. This was the Biological Diversity Act. इसको Biodiversity Act भी बोलते हैं. This was an act which was passed because of CBD, a Convention on Biological Diversity था जो international treaty हुआ था. Now under India's obligation under the CBD, we came up with this Biological Diversity Act. Now what does it do? This is for the conservation of biological diversity. That means so itna biodiversity hai, and our country has you know has a very wide biodiversity, is very you know, it has a lot of biodiversity. So in order to protect it, not to ensure that वो biodiversity conserve हो रहा है, it is not misused, it is to ensure कि जो हमारे ecosystems हैं वो मान लो जो हमारे, you know, whether it's we're talking about forest or talking about aquatic life, whatever, you know, that everything there has to be a conservation. And even when exploitation is happening, exploitation should be in a manner which is sustainable, right? So all those kind of concepts have come up, have been covered under the Biological Diversity Act of 2002. Okay, So that was this. अच्छा, एक मुझे यहाँ पे रुद्राक्ष बोल रहा है भाई absolute liability was laid down in oleum gas leak. Yes, oleum gas leak case, that is MC Mehta versus Union of India. That was the case in which absolute liability was laid down. You're very right. But वो laid down क्यों हुआ था? क्योंकि it was in the wake of Bhopal gas tragedy. Everybody was so scared and so shocked that they really wanted to do something more, right? So yes, it was, you're correct. It was laid down in oleum gas leak. Okay. Ab last important legislation so far as environment law is concerned is your National Green Tribunal. ये एक्ट है जिसके अंडर आपके NGT जो नेशनल ग्रीन ट्राइब्यूनल है that has been established specifically to look after cases which which deal with the environment, right? तो normally ट्राइब्यूनल का काम क्या होता है? ट्राइब्यूनल का काम होता है किसी स्पेसिफिक सब्जेक्ट के ऊपर जजमेंट देना, right? Because there is so much of litigation happening in our country and the courts are generally overburdened. तो हमारे यहाँ we have this concept of tribunals. Can you give me some examples of any other tribunals in the country जो कि use which have the power or which have been used to give judgments on specific topics? और कौन से tribunals? Quick, give me some example of tribunals. AILET, okay, income tax tribunal. In fact, income tax वाला जो tribunal, that was the first tribunal to be established. ठीक है? Okay. Yes. भाई income tax ही है. Consumer courts are also tribunals. Good. Then you have the administrative tribunal, central administrative tribunal, CAT. You have the water tribunal. Good, very nice. So what is the difference between these tribunals and courts? Why are they called tribunals? In fact, एक tribunals के generally word use किया जाता है कि ये quasi judicial bodies हैं. भाई ये क्यों है quasi judicial bodies? Can anybody tell me why are they quasi judicial bodies? Why aren't they judicial bodies? Because courts, जो regular courts हैं हमारे, they are supposed to be judicial bodies, right? But these tribunals are supposed to be quasi judicial bodies. And why is that? Tribunals are lower than high courts but are central in nature. Okay. Burden of courts कम करना है इसलिए tribunals हैं. Hasika is telling me, okay. But ये quasi judicial क्यों? Why not judicial? Why aren't they judicial forums? Why are they quasi judicial forums? Anybody can help me with that? Yes. कोर्ट्स का बर्डन कम करती है ट्राइब्यूनल्स, हाई कोर्ट्स का बर्डन भी कम करती है बिकॉज जनरली फ्रॉम दीज ट्राइब्यूनल्स दी अपील्स नॉर्मली गो टू दी सुप्रीम कोर्ट. जैसे एनजीटी, द चेयरपर्सन ऑफ एनजीटी इज, कैन यू टेल मी हु इज द चेयरपर्सन ऑफ एनजीटी? The chairperson of NGT is a retired Supreme Court judge and whatever award he gives. अच्छा, जब courts decision देते हैं ना तो वो judgment होता है, order होता है. पर जब quasi judicial tribunal judgment देता है उसको हम बोलते हैं award. ठीक है, तो वो award grant करते हैं. तो जब आपके tribunals award grant कर रहे हैं, then if the NGT, okay, good, Udit, Justice Adarsh Goyal, he is the current chairperson of the NGT. Now, if there is an appeal from the order, from the award of NGT, then it will go directly to the Supreme Court. So, आप directly Supreme Court में जाते हो, ठीक है? So, it's not as though these don't have value and the government. NGT, बच्चा रुद्राक्ष, is National Green Tribunal. ठीक है? NGT is National Green Tribunal. Okay. So if you look at this, it's not as though the courts can overturn the decision easily. It's not as though they lack any kind of authority. The decision given by quasi-judicial bodies, your tribunals, are as binding as given by any courts. The only difference here lies in the fact कि यहाँ पे जो members होते हैं, you are the guy who's giving the person who's giving the award, who is finally passing the order which is going to be binding on the parties. that person may or may not be a judicially qualified person. Because if you ever look at, like, even in NGT, you'll have a chairperson, there would be a member, and then there would be a member who is specifically qualified in that particular area. Ab NGT mein environment se related koi, there would be a person who specializes in that. He may not be legally qualified. That is why it is quasi-judicial. Quasi-judicial, all tribunals are quasi-judicial bodies. Why? Because they headed, they may or may not be headed, but the members of the tribunal could be judicial or they could also be non-judicial, right? Like when you look at the Armed Forces Tribunal, AFT karke hai, which looks after the cases relating to armed forces. So Armed Forces Tribunal mein kya hoga? One would be a retired High Court judge or a Supreme Court judge, and the other person is going to be retired army officer or an Air Force officer or a naval officer. So you need one person who has a specialization in that particular field, jiske cases wo tribunal sunta hai. That is why it's a quasi-judicial body, always remember. ठीक है? छोटे-छोटे concepts होते हैं, but इनकी clarity रहना अच्छा रहता है, because in CLAT, especially the way questions come nowadays, passages में बहुत conceptual चीजें आती हैं कई बार, right? So you should have clarity on this concept. Yes, Nitya, good. In income tax hall, there's one judicial and one accountant member. Good. So that's exactly how it works in all tribunals generally. Okay. Chalo, let's move on from major legislations. अब हमारा last part of environmental law CLAT के हिसाब से क्या-क्या important है. In fact, वो जो part है वो I would say it is one of the most important parts, because आज तक जितने CLAT में questions आए हैं, ये सारे के सारे इन अलग-अलग प्रिंसिपल के ऊपर बेस्ड ही आए. Like if you look at the 2020 paper, 2020 paper में क्या concept आया था, question आया था? Anybody remembers? So that Vizag में जो actual real life incident था, there was this gas leak and all which had happened, and they had picked that up and they had made a question out of it. And जब उन्होंने उसको question frame किया था, what were the legal principles involved? They had given you the principle of polluter pays, they had given you the principle of strict liability, and they had given you the principle of absolute liability, right? Similarly, अभी जो 2022 का पेपर हुआ है recently, इसमें जो environment law में passage आया था, again, what were the concepts involved? There was sustainable development involved, there was this doctrine of public trust involved, there were these two very different kind of doctrines called anthropocentric and ecocentric. All these new concepts or principles were involved, right? So this part of our discussion today is very, very important. I would recommend that all of you take note of these principles. See, environment law principles, if you go on web, there'll be tons and tons of them. But the important part is you have to check what is relevant for CLAT, right? So here I have tried to, concisely accumulate or, put together concepts which are really, really important. Okay, so let's first start with the polluter pays principle. A polluter pays principle, what does it say? It's fairly simple. It's almost like, the person who's made a mess, it is his responsibility to clear it up. Very normally, very colloquially, if you put it, that is what it basically means. So what does it mean legally? It says there is an absolute liability of the polluter. So it's the absolute liability of the polluter for any harm which is caused to the environment. Right? So whatever harm which has been caused to the environment, the polluter will have to make good that loss, right? And we are not talking about in loss caused only to human beings. We are making it wider. कि human beings को loss cause हुआ है, उसको तो आपको make good करना ही पड़ेगा. In addition to that, environment को भी जो भी loss cause हुआ है, that also has to be made good. Right? Very, very important concept, has been appearing in your exam for quite some time. 2020 के पेपर में specific questions इसके ऊपर आए थे. right? So again, very very important. Next आ जाता है आपका public trust doctrine. ये तो भाई इसी साल 2022 में जो मई में अगर if anyone of you have seen the paper, or if any of you have actually attempted the paper this year, you would know you had come across this concept of public trust doctrine. Public trust doctrine क्या है? Basically it means that all the natural resources, something natural resources which are of real importance, whether it's seashore or it is forest or land under the forest, wetlands. Who is supposed to have ownership of all those places? It is supposed to be the state, right? They said since these are gifts of nature, you do not want them to be subject to private ownership. Rather, it is the state who will take care of them, not as the owner. Private ownership bhi nahi hai aur state ownership bhi nahi hai. State will hold it in trust. That means state will act as a trustee and it will hold it for the benefit of normal people, for the people, right? So people are going to be the beneficiaries and trustee hoga aapka government yahan pe, right? The state hai wo trustee hai and state is holding them for the benefit of the people. So everybody, all the individuals in the society have a right over those resources. State will ensure ki they are protected, they are preserved and over exploitation nahi hoga, right? So they are holding, so it is not as the state is the owner of all these resources, natural resources. No, they are going to hold it in trust, right? So that's your public trust doctrine. This year it had featured in the exam. Okay. Next is the concept of sustainable development. Now, sustainable development, I'm sure this is one of those concepts that sabne suna hai, right? This is something which is taught to you in school also. So EVS ka part hota hai aajkal, sustainable development, right? And here, what does it mean? That you're supposed to, your development has to be such that needs not as that the present generation's needs are met without compromising the ability of future generations, right? तो future आपको अपने resources ऐसे use करने हैं कि भाई future generations के लिए भी वो available हो, right? We don't want to finish all our fossil fuels right now and अगली generation के पास कुछ बचे ही ना. That is the basic concept of sustainable development. Sometimes it is criticized, because they say it's an oxymoron. Because एक तरफ आप बोल रहे हो sustainable और दूसरे बोल रहे हो development. बोलते हैं कि there's certain people who feel that अगर development हो रही है तो sustainability तो उसमें possible है ही नहीं, right? It's kind of, development is always unsustainable. But of course, that's the reason why we have these concepts. That's the reason why we need to implement it right now. Because ऐसा ना हो कि हम अपनी resources इतनी quickly खत्म कर दें, इतनी without paying heed to anybody else's needs but our own needs, and there is nothing left for anyone else, right? So we don't want that to happen. That is why we have the concept of sustainable development. अच्छा, अब ये सस्टेनेबल डेवलपमेंट से मिलता जुलता सिमिलर कई बार ये रैंडमली इंटरचेंजेबली भी यूज होता है, इज द कॉन्सेप्ट ऑफ इंटरजेनरेशन इक्विटी प्रिंसिपल. Now, intergenerational equity principle is basically that, when as human beings, when you look at your natural or your cultural resources, you hold them or you're supposed to use them not only for yourself. They are there not only for yourself, but for future generations also, right? तो ये आपके लिए भी है और ये future generations के लिए भी है. Very similar to sustainable development. So they mean quite the same thing, right? Okay, so I hope till here we are clear and I'm hoping that you're taking note of these concepts. Next aata hai aapka absolute liability. Absolute liability, I'm sure all of you are aware of कि भाई कोई भी ultra hazardous inherently dangerous activity अगर आप कर रहे हो, then you are going to be absolutely liable for any loss which is caused because of that activity. And unlike strict liability, there are no defenses, nothing. कुछ भी होगा, चाहे आप negligence था आपका या नहीं था, भी earthquake आ गया जिसकी वजह से वो loss cause हो, whatever might be the reason, you are going to be absolutely liable, right? Again, a very often tested area. Okay, it was in the 2020 paper कि absolute liability को इन्होंने environment law से straight away relate करके अपना question बनाया था. It is a concept which came out because of a gas leak which did affect the environment. We just discussed oleum gas leak case के time पे ये absolute liability का principle lay down करा था. ठीक, so that's fairly simple. I don't think so we need to discuss it in detail. दूसरा आपका आता है, next आता है precautionary principle. A precautionary principle is, as the name suggests, that you want to be cautious, take precautions in your development, right? So if whatever you are planning as development, you are supposed to take care that it does not pose any threats or pose any damage, irreversible, serious damage to the environment, right? So ye ho sakta hai ki it is going to cause, you have to be cautious of, or even if there is a threat. In both the cases, you have to ensure that whatever development you're doing, you are not causing some serious irreparable damage. कई बार इस precautionary principle को हम preventive principle के नाम से भी जानते हैं. Very slight difference between the two. Sometimes the term which is used is preventive principle. Again, means the same, that you are trying to prevent a damage from happening. Before that damage happens, आप कुछ steps पहले से ही ले लो in order to ensure that that damage does not take place. In fact, one of these steps which you take in under precautionary principle or preventive principle is the next one, which is known as environment impact assessment, EIA. This is like a precaution you take before any kind of development activity. हमारी country में भी EIA is something which is used whenever, if you want to put up a factory or, carry out any kind of a developmental work, आपको पहले EIA certification चाहिए होता है, environment impact assessment. You have to submit to the government, a real, an assessment as to जो आप फैक्ट्री या जो भी आप ये एक्टिविटी कैरी आउट करोगे, इसका एनवायरनमेंट पे इम्पैक्ट क्या होगा. So there is these set of rules, or there are these guidelines which are provided as to how this EIA is supposed to be taken, undertaken, right? So ये laws are there regarding this, telling us how the environment impact assessment has to be done. But this is something which is very, very, very crucial, and ये है आपका एक टाइप का प्रिकॉशन, प्रिवेंटिव मेजर है कि भाई अगर बाद में लॉस हो ही जाएगा, एनवायरनमेंट का डैमेज हो ही गया, अगर आपने डैम बनाना है, डैम बनाने से पहले आप पहले असेस करोगे कि अगर यहाँ डैम बना तो इसका फर्दर ऑन आगे इम्पैक्ट एनवायरनमेंट पे क्या होगा, राइट? सो दैट्स योर EIA. Very, very important nowadays. In fact, our government is pretty strict so far as the EIA is concerned nowadays. Okay, that's another concept under environment law. फिर एक और concept आता है यहाँ पे जिसको हम बोलते हैं substitution principle. Now, substitution principle basically is a principle which, or a practice which wants people to replace, try to replace practices which have a lower impact on the environment, right? So if you're using, let's say, when you look at the cars, at present, majority of our cars are run on either diesel or petrol. So government ने पहले क्या किया? Diesel was supposed to have the impact on environment much more than petrol, right? So the subsidy on diesel was slowly removed, right? So now petrol and diesel, they don't cost, there's not much of a difference between their cost, right? Because we are slowly seeing that ये alternative सही नहीं है. In fact, we've moved on to electric cars now, where the impact on environment is even less. So substitution principle says कि ऐसी चीज use करो जिसका environment पे impact कम से कम हो, right? That's the basic concept behind substitution principle. Okay, let's move on. Next आपका आता है principle of good neighborliness. Now, when you talk about the principle of good neighborliness, this in fact is not just a concept in of environment law, but this is a concept under international law, right? So international law का principle है that whatever you are doing within your territory, right, you should try to ensure that उसके जो भी after effects हैं, they are confined within your territory only. वो बाहर ना जाए. So especially, this becomes very, very true when it comes down to environment related things, because you do an activity, that activity or that whatever development activity you're doing, uska impact jo hai bahar bhi ja sakta hai, right? So the principle of good neighborliness is basically that you try to restrict the impact and it should not go beyond your jurisdiction. Okay, that's the principle of good neighborliness. Next is the principle of common heritage. Now, common heritage, again, some of these principles are very similar. जैसे हमने अब जब sustainable development किया था, similar आता है common heritage. It basically means, if you look at this principle, you realize ये तो public trust doctrine and sustainable development इन दोनों का amalgamation है. Right? Because here, what are they saying? They're saying कि भाई जितनी भी ये natural resources हैं, they belong to all humanity. वो सभी human, पूरे के पूरे humans के लिए available है, and therefore they should be used in a manner that they fulfill the needs of the entire humanity as well as of the generations to come. So what you realize is कि बस ये तो public trust doctrine and अपना sustainable development का एक mixture बन गया, right? So that's basically a principle of common heritage of mankind. Take simple concepts. The idea is, my basic idea behind today's session was that I should introduce you to these concepts. I'm saying this again and again. Some of you will say, ma'am, कितनी बार बोलोगे ये चीज? But I really want to drill it inside your heads कि boss, मैं तुम्हें concepts बता रही हूँ. I would advise that you read upon these things, right? Random articles पढ़ो, widen करो अपना horizons and concepts के बारे में. ठीक? अच्छा, चलो. Next is your common but differentiated responsibilities. Now, this is something जो कि बहुत ही ज़्यादा controversial टाइप का एक कॉन्सेप्ट है, प्रिंसिपल है, जहां पे हम बोलते हैं कि भाई कॉमन रिस्पॉन्सिबिलिटी तो है कि जो भी एनवायरनमेंट को चाहे प्रोटेक्ट करना है या एनवायरनमेंट को वी हैव टू सी दैट इट फ्लरिशेस, वी हैव टू सी दैट वी आर नॉट कॉजिंग मच हार्म टू इट. ये सारे की सारी ह्यूमैनिटी की एक कॉमन रिस्पॉन्सिबिलिटी तो है, बट at the same time it is a differentiated responsibility. Why? Because the industrialized countries, the so-called developed world, is the one who have A, caused most harm to the environment, and B, have the most resources to actually make good the harm which has been caused, right? That is why ye common but differentiated responsibility ka concept aata hai, right? So therefore ye aapne, you must have heard of this Kyoto protocol, ye climate change se related jo aapka Kyoto protocol hai, where every country has been given a different set of responsibility, whether it's your emissions or things like that, कि भाई आपके कितने emissions या कितना आपका limit होना चाहिए, right? And that limit is different for different parts of the world, right? So that's your common but differentiated responsibility. Acha, in today's class, I haven't really touched upon many international treaties or conventions because I wanted to focus on these major principles. And what you would realize is when you're reading about these major principles, you'll come across a lot of international treaties, multilateral agreements, whether it's the Kyoto Protocol or, you have the Doha rounds, you have Convention on Biodiversity. They're all these international important environmental law related international treaties, right? Now, normally, क्लैट में आपसे इन स्पेसिफिक ट्रीटीज के बारे में हिस्टोरिकल या ऐसा कुछ तो नहीं आएगा until something which has been in news, तो वो करंट अफेयर्स वाले उसमें कवर होगा. बट इन जनरल, in order to understand these principles better, if you read about all these conventions and all, it is a good idea. Again, I'm not saying that you to learn them up, but a healthy reading is something which is very, very essential. ठीक है? एक holistic idea आपको मिलता रहेगा. Now, last two principles जो यहाँ mentioned है, these are the ones which had come in the paper this time, जो 2022 का paper था, they were a part of this paper. In fact, ये जो anthropocentrism का concept है, it is not necessarily related only to environment law. It is a concept, it's a concept which talks about the fact that we as humans think that we are the center of the universe. It is like पूरा का पूरा universe जो है वो हमारे लिए ही चलता है. जो पूरी की पूरी earth है, that has been made for us only. That we are the only ones who are the most important species in this entire planet or in this entire universe. So that is why चाहे आप sustainable development बोलो या कोई और भी environment law के जितने हमारे concepts है वो देखोगे, all those are kind of pointing towards the fact that our needs should be met. अब sustainable development क्या बोलता है? आज हमारी आज की needs ही नहीं देखनी, हमारी future की needs भी देखनी है, हमारी generations की. We are not concerned about the environment basically. Yeah? We are being very, very focused on our own needs कि भाई कल को हमारे बच्चे होंगे, उनके बच्चे होंगे, उनको भी थोड़ा सा हरे पेड़ पौधे वगैरह दिखने चाहिए. Right? So that was the concept of anthropocentrism. Right? So when we are looking at this, we are saying that, like, वो जो पूरी solar system का जो sun है वो हम है ना, बाकी सारी चीजें हमारे लिए ही बनी है, and we are the ones who are the most important. Right? That is what exactly this concept is about. On the other hand, इसका exactly opposite concept होता है आपका ecocentrism. Right? अब ecocentrism क्या बोलता है? That we are a part of the entire environment. Right? We are not the focal point. Rather, we are just one more. जिसे बोलते हैं ना कि एक और पेग है हम. ये पूरा का पूरा एक मान लो there's this entire system which is running and we are just part of that entire system. There's nothing very special about it, about us as such. Right? So it's nature centered. It is life centered rather than being human centered. Right? Whereas anthropocentrism is about being human centered. Okay, so that was the basic difference. Now I'm hoping that you guys have a bit of an idea about what the important key points or key concepts are regarding environmental law, right? So ye kuch aapke important points the. Now I'm hoping all of you have made a note of all the things that we have done in today's session. This was something which is very, very important. Okay. If any of you have any doubts, then you can put it in the chat box. I think I have taken care of whatever questions were here. Okay. Now, if noted, good Hasika, and अगर आपको लग रहा है कि आज live session में जल्दी mix जल्दी questions और concepts हो रहे थे, you can again visit this particular session to make your notes, right? Udit is asking me how were questions formed on these last two principles. I would recommend you see the paper, bacha. Paper was there, and the questions were on a certain activity. Like, okay, I'll tell you the first question which was there under this concept. There's this person, an academician who is doing research on butterfly. The various stages in the life of a butterfly, right from a larvae to caterpillar and finally वो जो butterfly होके जो पूरा उसका life cycle है उसके ऊपर वो research कर रही है. She gets a butterfly and she's doing research on that, right? So the question was, would it be considered, like there were various options, I'll give you broad, would it be considered as anthropocentrism or would it be considered as ecocentrism? Which one would it be? Can you tell me? एंथ्रोपोसेंट्रिज्म होगा या इकोसेंट्रिज्म होगा? जब आप एक एकेडमिशियन हो एंड आपका ये लाइन ऑफ स्टडी है एंड यू आर डूइंग रिसर्च ऑन दिस बटरफ्लाइज एंटायर लाइफ साइकिल, व्हिच वन वुड बी? वुड इट बी anthropocentrism or would it be ecocentrism? Nothing was told as to why she was doing or something, but just this fact. Good. Good, very nice, Rudraksh, Udit, Hasika. Good, it would be as anthro. Why? Because वो अपने academic interest के लिए research कर रही है ना, वो environment के या butterfly के interest के लिए थोड़ा ना research कर रही है. That is to further her own academic interest that she is doing this research. right? So that's an example of the question which had come on this particular concept, right? So I would recommend to each one of you that go see that passage जिसमें 2-4 ये कॉन्सेप्ट्स कवर हुए थे. पब्लिक ट्रस्ट डॉक्ट्रिन था, सस्टेनेबल डेवलपमेंट था, एंथ्रोपोसेंट्रिज्म था एंड इकोसेंट्रिज्म था. ये 4 कॉन्सेप्ट उसमें आए थे. एंड आई वांट यू गाइस, I am saying it again, to go ahead and read on these concepts. ठीक, चलो, then I believe that's where we come to an end with the session for today. Oh, we are right on time, huh? Dot at 8. And so those of you who are new to Clat Possible, you know, these are some of our social media platforms. You can always reach us here. We have a lot of content which is useful for everybody who is preparing for the Clat exam. We are very active on all these platforms. I would recommend that you visit each one of them. Okay, chalo then, take care everyone. And for rest of you who are there with us already, see you in the class. Oh, Sujal is telling me happy Janmashtami. Thank you Sujal, seriously yaar, Janmashtami मैंने भी fast रखा हुआ है, भूख लग रही है, at least पानी तो पी सकते हैं. I am just thinking what will I eat while I was talking to you guys, and I am wearing red and मुझे अपने fridge में watermelon रखा हुआ याद आ रहा है. So I think जय श्री कृष्ण करके मुझे watermelon खाना पड़ेगा. ठीक है, चलो then. Thank you so much everyone. Take care and do go ahead and do some research and reading. Okay, chalo, take care. Bye bye. See you next time.